The perfect tool. That's what the man sleeping in my bed called the wife who betrayed me. From a nondescript motel room miles away, I sat in front of my laptop screen, listening to his every word through a security system he never knew existed. My wife, Leah, thought she was executing the perfect plan, scamming me out of our house and $112,000 in savings. Her lover, Trevor, knew the real prize was the land beneath that house, a $2.5 million gold mine. What neither of them knew was that I, the husband they thought was stuck in Mosul, was listening to it all. The divorce email Leah sent wasn't an ending. It was the signal to begin a campaign. They thought they were up against a damaged soldier. They didn't know they were feeding me all the intel I needed to plan the perfect counteroffensive. They made one fatal mistake. They made my home their command post, and they made me their enemy. The laptop screen cast a faint blue glow in the makeshift command center in Mosul. 15 years of my marriage, terminated by an email. The air was thick with the smell of diesel and the hum of servers, but to me it was silent. And then, a notification popped up, a subjectless email from Leah. I clicked. It wasn't a letter. It was laid out like a battle damage assessment. 3 lines, no more, no less. The bullet points were concise, efficient, and brutal. Item 1. Divorce papers have been filed. Item 2. Our joint accounts have been dealt with. Item 3. Her new boyfriend, Trevor, has moved into our house in Fayetteville. A surge of anger should have erupted, but it didn't. Instead, a strange calm washed over me. It was the peace that comes when a potential threat finally reveals itself. The rage didn't evaporate. It froze, compressing into a cold, focused core of energy. I read the email twice, not for feeling, but for confirmation of facts. I felt no anger, only an unusual stillness. Miller, my roommate, glanced over from his cot. "You good, Sarge?" he asked, not looking up from his book. "All good," I replied, my voice even. "Just stuff from home." He nodded. It was the signal that the conversation was over. Soldiers know when to leave a man alone. I snapped the military-issue laptop shut, the dry click the only sound in the room. I stood, walked to the communal latrine, stood under the cold shower, and let the water wash away the desert dust and the heat of nascent anger. I dressed for my shift, not saying a word to anyone. Back at my cot, I opened the computer again. I didn't reread her email. Instead, I logged into our bank account. Joint checking, $17.34. Joint savings, $0. Amount transferred out, $62,000. Gone. The numbers didn't lie. They were cold, hard facts. The damage assessment was complete. I started to open a reply. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The laptop screensaver flickered on. It was a photo of the two of us at Myrtle Beach from last year, Leah beaming, a smile I once thought could chase away any darkness. I stared at that smile for 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Then, I moved the mouse and clicked the close button. The picture vanished. Now, I opened the reply. To Leah Hayes. Body. Copy that. No arguments. No begging. No threats. That's how it ended. One war was over here in Mosul. Another had just begun in Fayetteville. And I always finish the wars I'm in. The truth is, the email wasn't a surprise. It was a confirmation of 8 months of observation, of data I had been quietly collecting. The changes started slowly. The warmth bled out of our conversations. "How was your day?" was replaced with a steady stream of complaints about the confining life of a military wife. Then came the secrets. She started going to the gym, but came home with dry clothes and the faint scent of strange cologne. New items appeared in her closet. New friends I'd never met were mentioned in whispered phone calls, and her phone screen suddenly had a password. She started quoting her friend Melissa, who had recently gotten a divorce and was living her best life, as if it were scripture, and then the name Trevor emerged. A financial advisor, Leah had said casually, but her tone held a hint of admiration as she repeated his words. Trevor says I have more potential than just Fayetteville. He promised a future unburdened by my deployments. A better future. Now I understood. Leah had completely bought into his spiel. I could picture her dutifully following his instructions, forging my signature, draining the $112,000 from our savings and accounts. I could see her smug satisfaction, believing she was getting away with over $100,000, and I was certain she had no idea she was just a tool in a much larger, more sinister plan to swindle us out of our own home. A piece of land she didn't know was worth $2.5 million. The picture was now clear. It fit the pieces I already had. I remembered a night in the garage, when I overheard a fragment of her phone call. The words were just pieces then, but now they made sense. When he's gone, the papers, and the perfect opportunity. Yes, my suspicion had been planted then, and now it had bloomed into undeniable truth. I didn't confront her. You don't warn the enemy they've been spotted. You simply prepare. In the weeks before I deployed, I acted silently and methodically. First, I rented a small storage unit across town, paying for 6 months in cash. Piece by piece, I moved everything that mattered. My birth certificate, our marriage license, and most importantly, the original deed to the house, which was under my name alone thanks to a VA loan. My grandfather's watch and my mother's silver went in too. The things that were actually valuable, the things that were irreplaceable. There was only one thing I couldn't move. The old oak tree in the backyard. The one my father planted the day I was born. That was my real inheritance. Next, I went to a different bank, one Leah knew nothing about, and opened a personal account. I arranged for a portion of my pay to be deposited there, not enough for her to notice, but enough to ensure I wouldn't be starting from zero if the worst happened. Everything was in place. The night before I left, she hugged me at the airport. It was a hollow embrace. "Stay safe," she said. But her eyes were dry and distant. It was like saying goodbye to a coworker, not a husband heading to a war zone. I knew for sure then. The email I had just received wasn't the beginning. It was just the starting gun, signaling that the enemy had moved exactly as predicted. I had been preparing for this moment, and I always finish the wars I'm in. 4 months later, a C-130 transport touched down on the tarmac at Pope Air Force Base. I hadn't told anyone I was coming home. Silence is a tactical advantage. Instead of going home, I rented a gray, nondescript pickup truck and found a cheap motel tucked away on an old highway. I checked in under a different name. I left no trail. In the motel room that smelled faintly of bleach, I pulled out a prepaid burner phone and dialed a single number. The line picked up on the second ring. "Cole." "Ethan," I said. "I'm back. Where are you?" His voice held a note of concern. "Doesn't matter. Meet me at Rosie's Diner on 74. 1 hour. Done." He didn't ask any more questions. Ethan was my friend, but more importantly, he was my lawyer. He understood operational security. Rosie's was an old metal box of a diner, sitting alone in a gravel lot where nobody paid attention to anyone else. I chose a booth in the back corner, my back to the wall, with a clear view of the entrance. Exactly 1 hour later, Ethan walked in. He scanned the room once, then came straight to my booth and slid his briefcase onto the seat. "You look like hell," he said without ceremony. "Feel like it," I replied, pushing a cup of coffee toward him. "Report." Ethan didn't waste time. He opened his briefcase and laid out a file. As you know, Ethan began, his voice flat. The $62,000 from the savings account is gone. The transaction was made 2 days after you deployed. I nodded. The number matched what I'd seen. He pushed another paper toward me. It was a home refinance application. This is the problem. It was an application to refinance the house, dated 3 months prior. The loan amount, $50,000. And at the bottom of the page, my signature, or a version of it. The stroke was hesitant, and the middle initial was completely wrong. A forgery, I asked, my voice cold. No question, Ethan confirmed. With the VA loan in your name, your signature was required. She and her boyfriend withdrew that cash last week, $112,000. The total damages were now updated. There's more, Ethan continued, flipping to another page in the file. I did some digging on this Trevor character. He's not some small-time amateur. His record shows a pattern, targeting military wives whose husbands are deployed, especially those who seem disgruntled. He manipulates them, drains their assets, and disappears. Cops in 2 other states are looking at him for similar schemes. So, Leah wasn't just having an affair. She'd tied herself to a professional predator. But all of that, Ethan said, and he paused, his eyes locking onto mine with meaning, is not the main objective. At first, I was just focused on the forgery, Ethan said. But something didn't feel right. Trevor isn't a petty grifter who goes to all this trouble for a few tens of thousands. His file showed that all his previous cases involved real estate with hidden value. He paused, looking straight at me. That made me wonder, why would a professional predator target a standard military house in Fayetteville? The answer wasn't the house. He flipped to the last page. It was a zoning map of Cumberland County and a few stapled news clippings. That question pushed me to dig into the county zoning records, and this is what I found. The plot of land your house sits on, he said slowly, was just rezoned for a new commercial development. It was passed quietly 6 months ago. The house itself is worthless, but the land, with commercial development rights, a conservative estimate, is about $2.5 million. The air in the diner seemed to thicken. The distant clatter of silverware and muffled conversations faded away. $2.5 million. Trevor, with his history, would have known this. He didn't want the pocket change in our accounts. He wanted the gold mine underneath the house. And to get it, to build a shopping center, they'd have to level everything, including that tree. My father's legacy. This war had just become a lot more personal. So, I said, my own voice sounding distant, the $112,000, that was just the bait. Exactly, Ethan said. The cost of acquiring control of the asset, a rounding error compared to the payout. He leaned back, his sharp lawyer's eyes fixed on me, waiting for a reaction. I said nothing. My hand, a soldier's hand, lay flat on the table, perfectly still. I slowly took a sip of the now cold coffee. Its bitterness was nothing. The image of my father's oak tree filled my mind, not as a peaceful memory, but as a strategic objective to be defended at all costs. Ethan gave a slight nod, an almost imperceptible smile on his lips. The last time I saw that look on your face was in Fallujah, right before you took out that sniper's nest by yourself, he said quietly. They have no idea who they're dealing with. He didn't ask what I was going to do next. He didn't have to. The question now is, he said, shifting back to his professional tone, does Leah know she's sitting on a gold mine? Or does she think the bait is the prize? I left the diner with Ethan feeling like I'd just walked out of an intelligence briefing, not a meeting with a lawyer. Everything had changed. This was no longer a messy divorce. This was an operation. That night, in the anonymous motel room, I opened my laptop. I didn't check email or news. I navigated to an IP address that only I knew. The screen resolved into 4 small windows, a live feed from the security cameras I'd installed in my own home a year ago. A simple precaution: living room, kitchen, hallway, front door. The feed was crystal clear. In the kitchen, a strange man was leaning against the counter I had tiled myself. He was wearing a worn-out t-shirt and holding my favorite coffee mug, the one my father had given me. It was Trevor, living in my house, using my things. Like he belonged there. I turned on the audio. Trevor's voice came through. Smug. She doesn't have a clue. Not a single one. Still thinks this whole thing is about a few tens of thousands from the house. Another voice, deeper and more authoritative, replied. I couldn't see this man. He was likely at the dining table, out of the camera's view. Good. Keep it simple. Let her think she's the smart one. Don't worry, Preston, Trevor chuckled. She's the perfect tool. A little flattery, a few promises, and she'll sign anything I put in front of her. Just make sure she does. As soon as that land sale is signed and the money is in the Caymans, you can do whatever you want with her. Ditch her. I don't care. But don't screw this up before then. No screw-ups, Trevor said, taking a sip from my mug. She'll be someone else's problem. I closed the laptop. Not a sound. So Ethan's question was answered. Leah wasn't a partner in a multi-million-dollar scheme. She was a pawn, a tool to be discarded once its purpose was served. This information didn't change my objective. It just made it clearer. I picked up the phone and sent a text to Ethan. Have audio confirmation. They're in the house. Get me everything you can on a Preston Vance. Now, the sun wasn't even up when I began my counteroffensive. There was no rush. Only precision. Target 1, the bank. At 9 a.m., I walked into the main branch and asked to see the head of security. I didn't explain myself to the receptionist. I just showed her my military ID. 5 minutes later, I was sitting across from a man named Thompson in a windowless office. I believe your bank has processed a fraudulent transaction using my assets, I said, placing the forged refinance application from Ethan on his desk. I slid my military ID and driver's license across the desk. This is my actual signature. I suggest you compare. He took the documents, his expression shifting from skeptical to concerned. He didn't have to be an expert to see the difference. I'll have our fraud department look into this immediately, Sergeant Hayes, he said, his initial confidence gone. I know you will, I replied. And you should also know that I'm recording this conversation. I left the bank. Target 1, secured. Target 2, the police. I drove directly to the county sheriff's department and asked to file a report. I laid out the facts, concisely and without emotion. Signature forgery, financial fraud. The desk sergeant took my statement mechanically. To him, it was another piece of paper. To me, it was a round in the chamber. While I was there, Ethan was executing his part of the mission. A text arrived at 11:30 a.m. Court has been petitioned. Emergency injunction granted. All transactions related to your home address are temporarily frozen. The net was being cast. A second text followed immediately. FBI is looped in. The name Preston Vance and a connection to multi-state fraud schemes got their attention. They want to meet. Good. The game was now on a whole new level. I sat in my anonymous truck, looking at my phone. 4 targets, 4 actions, all completed before lunch. The gears of justice were now turning, slowly but unstoppably, and they had no idea I was even in the country. The FBI moved faster than I expected. They didn't go after Trevor or Preston. They went after the weakest link. 2 days later, Ethan called. His voice held a note of unconcealed satisfaction. They found her, Caleb, Melissa Shaw, the one and only, Ethan confirmed. They didn't arrest her. They just invited her to their office for a chat, as Leah's best friend. Apparently, sitting in a gray room with 2 federal agents is not what she imagined living her best life would be like. She folded. I could picture it. Melissa's borrowed confidence dissolving in the face of reality. The prospect of being named an accomplice in a federal fraud investigation is a powerful antidote to delusion. Her lawyer contacted me, Ethan continued, his voice calculated. I told him that in these situations, cooperation is always looked upon favorably. I think he conveyed that message to his client very clearly. And she agreed? I asked. Though I already knew the answer, she turned over her phone, a full data dump. She wants a deal to save her own skin. An hour later, an encrypted file arrived in my inbox. I opened it. It was the entire chat history between Leah and Melissa for the past 6 months. Hundreds of messages. I read through them methodically, skipping the meaningless gossip, searching for intel, and then I found it. A conversation thread from 3 months ago. I could imagine Leah's tone as she typed the words. A mix of smugness and excitement. She bragged to Melissa about how she was about to get all the savings and the loan from the house. About how I would come back to nothing. She even ended it with a triumphant, serves him right. Melissa, predictably, responded with weak admiration. Oh my God. You're so brave. I wish I had the guts to do that. But the decisive message came from Leah. It wasn't just bragging. It was a confession. When Melissa asked how, Leah replied as if it were the most minor detail in the world. It's nothing, just a little forgery of his signature. Trevor said he'd handle the rest. These words were the smoking gun. They confirmed Leah's role. She wasn't an innocent victim being manipulated. She was an active and willing co-conspirator in the $112,000 fraud. She knew about the forgery. She was part of it. I saved the screenshots to an encrypted folder titled Evidence, Phase 1. The bait I had laid for Melissa 8 months ago, Ethan's business card. The offer of help if things ever get serious had finally been triggered. Not by me, but by her own fear. Leah had been taken down by the very best friend she trusted. My plan was proceeding on schedule, step by step, with the evidence from Melissa. The next step in my plan was to confront Leah. But before I could make that move, an unexpected variable appeared. An email arrived in my personal account, one Leah didn't know existed. The subject was a single word, Trevor. The body was even shorter. I know you're Leah Hayes' husband. I know you're looking into Trevor Jennings. We need to talk. Central Park. Bench by the lake. Tomorrow at noon. Come alone. No name, no explanation. It was a risk. But in intelligence, sometimes the most unexpected sources are the most valuable. The next day at noon I was there. I arrived a half hour early, choosing a position where I could observe the entire area. At precisely 12, a woman approached the designated bench. She looked nervous, but her eyes held a fierce determination. Are you Caleb Hayes? She asked, her voice quiet but clear. I nodded. My name is Callie, she said, sitting at the other end of the bench, keeping a safe distance. I was in your wife's shoes once. I'm Trevor's ex. I remained silent, letting her continue. What your wife is going through, she said, her voice chillingly calm. She's not the first, and she won't be the last, if we don't do something. She opened her purse and pulled out a USB drive. Trevor didn't just scam your wife. He's done this to 9 other women before her. All military wives. all manipulated. All of them lost their homes, their money, and their dignity. She placed the USB drive on the bench between us. Everything I've gathered for the last 2 years is on here, she said. The names of the victims, the account numbers, the shell corporations he uses to launder the money, audio recordings. I was one of them, Caleb. He took everything from me. I've spent the last 2 years making sure he would pay. She stood up. When I found out he was targeting your wife, I watched in despair. But I'm just one person. I couldn't do anything. Until last week, when I was randomly checking public county records and saw a temporary injunction placed on your property for suspected fraud, the one filed by your lawyer. I knew right then that this husband was different from the others. You were fighting back. That's why I had to find you. Use this, not just for your wife, for all of us. She turned and walked away without a second glance. I sat there for a long moment. Then, I picked up the USB drive. The battlefield had just expanded, and I had just been handed a new arsenal. With the new arsenal in hand, my plan shifted. This was no longer a time for reconnaissance. It was time to attack. I sent Ethan the entire contents of the USB drive. Hours later, he called back, his voice filled with awe. Caleb, this changes everything. I know, I replied. Set up a meeting with the FBI. And with Leah. It's time for the endgame. The location was a nondescript conference room in an office building the FBI used for off-the-books meetings. No windows. Just a long table, a few chairs, and a two-way mirror. I knew was occupied. Ethan and I arrived first. Agent Harris, the lead on the case, walked in moments later. Leah arrived last. She walked into the room with her usual confidence, but it evaporated when she saw me and a federal agent sitting at the table. She glanced at me, her eyes a mixture of anger and a flicker of alarm. What is this, Caleb? She demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. Agent Harris didn't let me answer. He placed a thin file on the table and slid it toward her. Do you recognize these messages, Mrs. Hayes? I watched the color drain from Leah's face as she looked at the printouts of her chat with Melissa. Her confidence shattered. Trevor made me, she stammered. Did he? Harris asked, his voice devoid of emotion. Did he make you forge your husband's signature to take out a $50,000 loan against your house? Did he make you brag to your friend about leaving your husband with nothing? Leah was speechless. But that's not even the interesting part, Harris continued. That money was never the real prize, was it? Let's talk about the $2.5 million. Leah, the value of the land Trevor was trying to steal from right under your nose. Leah's head snapped up, her eyes wide with genuine confusion. $2.5 million? What are you talking about? It was my turn. My voice was cold and even. He didn't tell you, did he? About the land's true value. About the 9 other women he scammed before you. Using the exact same playbook, I placed Callie's USB drive on the table next to the file. You weren't special, Leah. You were just number 10. The next pawn in his game. That was the final blow. The realization that she hadn't just been scammed out of money, but that she was just a number. Another common victim in a long line of tragedies. The entire world Trevor had built for her collapsed in an instant. She slumped forward, burying her face in her hands, her body shaking with silent, racking sobs. The room was quiet for a long time. Finally, Harris spoke. You have 2 options, Mrs. Hayes. You can face charges as a co-conspirator in a multi-state federal fraud ring, or you can cooperate with us, help us set a trap, and maybe, just maybe, you can save yourself. Leah lifted her head. Tears had streaked her makeup, In her eyes, the fear had been replaced by something else. A cold, burning rage. "He asked me to sign a power of attorney," she said, her voice shaking with hatred. "He said it was just a formality, so we could be together. He lied to me." She looked from me to Harris. "What do I have to do?" The battle plan was drawn up in that windowless room, with Leah as the primary bait. Her role was simple: be scared, be passive, and pass along information. Phase 1 was to set a ticking clock. From my motel room, I took out a burner phone and composed a text, every word calculated to convey exhaustion and resignation. "Leah, I'm done fighting. My lawyer, Ethan, will be at the house on Friday at 2 p.m. to begin inventory procedures for the assets. Just let him in." Leah, under FBI supervision, forwarded the message to Trevor. As we predicted, he called her immediately. Leah played the part of a panicked wife to perfection, and Trevor, true to his psychological profile, moved to soothe his mark. He had no idea the clock was now running. I told Ethan over the phone. "The false deadline is set. He can't have a lawyer inventorying an asset he's trying to sell. He'll have to accelerate his timeline." Now, it was time to deploy the second piece of bait. An FBI agent, posing as a wealthy real estate investor named Mr. Peterson, had already made contact with Preston Vance. Now, he called again. The call was on speakerphone in the FBI command room. Peterson's voice was impatient, but powerful. "Preston, I have to fly overseas this weekend. If we don't close this deal by Friday, I'm afraid I'll have to move on to another opportunity. I need a firm answer." A short silence on the other end of the line. We could picture Vance weighing his options. My lawyer arriving on one side, a cash buyer about to walk on the other. Pressure from both flanks. "Friday," Vance finally said, his voice firm. "We'll have everything ready. We'll meet at the house Friday morning to sign." The call ended. The tension in the command room eased. Ethan looked at me and nodded decisively. He took the bait. He'll have to meet with Trevor to finalize the details. They'll be in the same place at the same time. The clock was ticking, and the prey was walking right into the designated kill zone. Friday morning. The Fayetteville sky was ironically clear and blue. From an unmarked van parked down the street, I watched my house through a pair of military-grade binoculars. Ethan sat beside me in silence. At 9 a.m. sharp, Leah's car pulled out of the driveway. She drove off to work as if it were any other day, a flawless performance down to the last detail, leaving no room for suspicion. 15 minutes later, the first target arrived. A sleek black BMW pulled up to the curb. Preston Vance got out, dapper in an expensive suit, carrying a leather briefcase. He looked more like a banker than a con man. Trevor opened the door. They shook hands, a confident conspirator's greeting, and went inside together. "They're in position," I said softly. I opened my laptop and pulled up the security feed. The living room camera showed a clear picture. A hidden microphone I had remotely activated was picking up every sound. Vance's voice came through, full of self-satisfaction. "The buyer is ready. The money will be wired to the Cayman account as soon as the papers are signed." "Perfect," Trevor replied with a smirk. "The idiot still thinks she's in control. She'll be someone else's problem soon enough." Ethan glanced at me. I gave him a slight nod. He understood. I forwarded the link to the live feed to Agent Harris with a short text. "It's happening. Go." The reply was almost instant. "Received. Teams are standing by." For the next 30 minutes, we listened as they discussed the final details, how they would split the $2.5 million. They were completely unaware that the FBI and local police had quietly surrounded the entire block. And then, the signal was given. Dark, unmarked sedans appeared from every direction, moving fast and silent. Agents in black tactical gear swarmed the house from the front and back doors. On my laptop screen, I watched the expressions on Trevor's and Vance's faces shift from smugness to confusion, then to sheer panic as guns were pointed directly at them. Minutes later, they were brought out in handcuffs. Preston Vance's polished exterior was gone, replaced by the shocked, disbelieving face of a loser. Right on cue, as planned, Leah's car returned. She parked across the street and got out, phone in hand, pretending to wonder about all the strange cars. I raised the binoculars, focusing on her face. Her eyes were wide. Confusion quickly turned to alarm, then to horrified realization as she saw Trevor, the man she'd bet everything on, being shoved into the back of an FBI vehicle by an agent. Game over. Checkmate. I wasn't present for the court proceedings that followed. My presence wasn't necessary. Ethan represented my interests, and the evidence spoke for itself. With the audio recordings from my security system, the text message history provided by Melissa, and the trove of data from Callie's USB drive, the case was airtight. Trevor Jennings was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for fraud, grand larceny, and racketeering. Preston Vance, the mastermind, received 10 years. A few days after the sentencing, Ethan sent me an encrypted audio file. The subject line: Post. Mission. Debrief. Leah Hayes. Interrogation. That night, in the quiet of my motel room, I put in my headphones. First came Leah's voice, confident and almost defiant. "I'm the victim here," she said. Trevor manipulated me. Then came Agent Harris's voice, calm and emotionless, as he read aloud the text messages between her and Melissa. There was a long silence. I could hear Leah's breathing become ragged. When faced with the irrefutable proof, when she realized that even playing the victim wouldn't work, her tone changed. The bravado shattered, replaced by a fragile, belated remorse. She began to confess everything. Not just her actions, but her own willing blindness. Her desperate desire to believe Trevor's lies. And then, I heard my name. I'm so sorry, Caleb," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I was wrong. I had no idea how much I was being used. I was so stupid. I'm sorry I betrayed you. For everything." I took off the headphones and set them down gently on the table. There was no satisfaction, just an emptiness, like the echo in a room that has just been cleared out. I walked to the window and looked out at the deserted motel parking lot under the yellow streetlights. The war was really over. Not just on paper, but in here. The next morning I checked out. I didn't look back. Leah accepted the harsh settlement Ethan offered to avoid criminal prosecution. She was required to repay the full $112,000 she had stolen. She relinquished all claims to any and all assets: the house, the multi-million-dollar plot of land, and my entire military pension. She also signed a full confession admitting to the forgery and her role in the conspiracy. The divorce was finalized quietly. No contests, no conditions, just an end. A few weeks later, Ethan forwarded me a letter. It had come from Leah's lawyer. Inside was a handwritten note. Unlike her first email, this one was an apology. Leah wrote about her foolishness, about getting swept up in hollow promises, and expressed a deep regret for hurting me and destroying our marriage. She made no excuses for her actions, only that she hoped I could find peace. I read the letter. The hurt was still there, but the anger was gone. I felt a sense of release in seeing her finally face the truth. I didn't reply, but I kept the letter. It felt like a marker that the war was truly over, not just legally, but for me. A few months later, once the dust had settled, I got a call from Agent Harris. "Sergeant Hayes," he said, his voice a bit more formal than usual. "I'm calling to inform you that your case became a key. He explained that the evidence gathered from my home, combined with the data from the USB drive, had allowed the FBI to dismantle Trevor and Vance's entire criminal network. They weren't just operating in North Carolina. They had targeted 9 other military families across 3 states. Because of your actions, Harris concluded, those families now have a chance at justice. Some of them might even get their money back. I never went back to the house in Fayetteville. To me, it was just a crime scene, a cold memory. Ethan handled the sale on my behalf. The house itself was sold quickly to cover legal fees, but the land beneath it, the land with my father's oak tree, my $2.5 million inheritance, I kept. 6 months later, I filed for early retirement. 15 years in the Army had been enough. I had done my duty, both at home and abroad. The cold anger that had fueled my long campaign was gone now. In its place, there was quiet. With a portion of the money from the land sale, I bought a small cabin deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains, just outside of Asheville. No neighbors for miles. Just the sound of the wind through the trees and a creek babbling out back. I started woodworking, making simple furniture for people in the local town. The physical labor cleared my head. My military pension covered the rest. Life became simple. One afternoon, checking the mailbox at the end of my dirt road, I found a letter with no return address. Inside was a handwritten note. Dear Sergeant Hayes, you don't know me, but my name is Sarah. My husband is in the Navy. We were one of the families you saved. Thank you for fighting when you could have just walked away. I read the letter twice. Then I took it inside and pinned it to the corkboard above my workbench. Sometimes in the quiet of the mountains, the old memories still surface. But now, all I have to do is look at that letter. It's a reminder that I defended my legacy, and so much more. And here, in these mountains, I'm building something new. Something that can't be stolen, forged, or betrayed. Something that's all mine.